welcome Red K Elders to the Fifth Direction space, which is our beautiful community, our mytho-poetic community here. It's a real honor to begin to get to know you and to enter into a conversation with you. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for rearranging your schedule to fit our strange discrepancy in hours.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I could say the same for you. I know you've got a lot going on. I usually begin by kind of asking people who join us here to kind of orient themselves so that listeners will know kind of where you are in the world and kind of what's going on. So if I could maybe kind of pose that to you to just let people know where it is you're sitting, maybe what time of day it is and kind of what's going on for you right now.
Sure. So I am in Norfolk in England. I am sitting in my studio and bodywork space and kind of like the hub of where everything goes on. And it's 9 a.m. So a nice respectable hour to beginning. Thank you. And yeah, we're just coming into spring here as well. So things are just warming up. The leaves right outside my window are in bud. The birds are singing. So yeah, it feels like a sort of hopeful and um, joyful time of the year to be starting these kind of conversations.
Oh, that's beautiful. We obviously here in Australia, it's kind of heading into that a very different kind of feeling and energy with autumn just arriving. So it's nice to feel into your blooming
Yeah.
buds. Um, and yeah, absolutely. And for those that don't know England too well, maybe you could kind of paint a little picture for us of Norfolk. And is that where you grew up or
But yeah. No, I didn't grow up here at all, but I've lived here for 17 years, I think now. So I kind of feel quite embedded in this land at the moment. But Norfolk it's in the east of England, and I don't know if you know the map of England, but there's a kind of like little hump that sticks out on the right side, and I'm in that little sort of top of that little hump at the coast, and it's very flat here. And just over the water is the Netherlands, so the similar kind of sort of flatlands kind of place. So there's a lot of salt marsh around the coast as well, where I spend a lot of time wandering about and drawing my inspiration from that sort of tidal incoming and outgoing. Um, so yeah, it's very quiet. It's very rural. There's no motorway, like main road here at all. You have to drive for like 2 hours to get to a motorway. So it's the kind of place where you don't arrive here by accident. You can't drive through here on your way to somewhere else. Um, and so it feels very slow here, and people really do slow down, and it's quite old fashioned in many ways too. um, but that's kind of nice. It's a great place to bring up kids, which is what I've been doing here. It feels safe. There's low crime. There's low, incidences of. I can walk around, for example. I can strip off on the salt marsh and walk around naked, and it's okay. I don't need to worry for my safety. Hopefully. um, so yeah, it's good. It's not where I go. I grew up in the northeast of England, near to Scotland, which is sort of more my ancestral lineage. And I do have a longing to go back there because I'm really a mountains and rocks kind of person. And there are no mountains and rocks here, none at all. And I really miss them and I really long for them.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
Well,
that's it.
I would say maybe that quietude, gives you the perfect place to kind of hone your craft. Um, and for those that are coming in not knowing Red, I was first drawn to you through seeing your incredible artwork, illustrations. I'm not sure how you refer to them, but of the gods and the deities, and that they really just drew me in. Even seeing them on a small screen through social media, which is how I first came across them. I found myself kind of arrested and then really caught up in them and kind of wanted to get to know the artist a little bit more. And as I did, and I think I was saying to you earlier when we were chatting, I found out that there's just so much more to you and what you do, which makes sense because I think that, the energy that lands on the page um, has to come from this kind of broad um, I guess, spiritual being that you are, and all the things that you've done to get to this point. So, I guess, um, maybe I could hand to you and hear in your words, what it is exactly that you're doing.
Sure. Well, I guess one thing to say would be that I've only really been doing drawing professionally or as my kind of full-time career for the last 4 years since the pandemic happened. And yeah, before that time, I was working as mostly as a deep body worker, a movement facilitator in like group movement facilitator. Um, I've done lots of other things as well, but that's what my work was chiefly before the pandemic happened. And then um, I couldn't practice that work anymore in the pandemic, so I was kind of scratching around to see what else I could do. Um, and drawing has always I've never really done drawing throughout my life. It's never been a thing I've done for long periods, but it's always arisen for short periods in times of like really big transition. And I've often felt it's kind of like my default coping mechanism. It's my sort of soothing place. It's my place of calm and inspiration and all of those things. So each time there's been a major transition in my life, I've had these periods of drawing that have seemed to steady and calm me. So naturally, when the pandemic happened and I lost all my work and still had my rent to pay and food to put on the table next month, I was like, what the fuck am I going to do? Um, and so I started drawing just to kind of soothe and calm myself, really, and haven't really looked back since. And now I'm doing it full time. Um, but yes, before that, the body work and the movement, the group movement work and the group workshop work I was doing, it's definitely really informed what I'm doing with the drawings, which feel to me almost an extension of that. They're almost like the kind of the sort of manifest form of what I was doing in the kind of, the unseen or the energetic spaces with the body work or with the group movement work. Um, so it feels to me like obviously like a distillation of all of that into a concrete form. But also like a continuation of it as well. I do my own movement practices and my own meditations and my own body work. And frequently I would bring back from those places words or little sketches or drawings. So it's kind of, for me, the artwork's almost like a fossil of what happens in those places. So as we were talking about earlier, it to me the most important part is the process of the drawing, is the kind of what happens during the drawing process, and then what comes at the end is kind of what it is. And it's not that I'm trying to get to the end point, but it's just being in that place where the drawing happens. And I guess I'm just blessed that what comes out at the end is sort of carries something of that perhaps, or brings something of that forth. And then it's been really surprising to me. I had no intention or ideas that they would touch and move other people in ways that I hadn't anticipated or predicted. And I think that's what people really started picking up on early on, which encouraged me to then do that more consciously, to start kind of thinking, okay, well, if these images can then positively impact other people in some ways, maybe I can kind of particularly work with that or be really curious about what it is to do that. So that's become more of a focused direction I've gone in with them. But ultimately, they are just what they are, and it's I'm just glad to be part of the process. It's very um, energizing and nurturing and sustaining for me to just do the practice of it. Mm.
Well, I can understand that. And did it begin with this particular focus on kind of mythic gods and goddesses? Is that where it began, or did it kind of like become, did that emerge out of something else?
So I guess it did kind of come from that. If I think back to an earlier period, the previous periods of drawing, it's like the drawings have become more embodied as they've gone along. So in an earlier period of transition, I have this whole collection of what I refer to as spirit drawings that are much more ethereal, much more sort of wispy, kind of sort of more like transitional. They're figurative, but they're not kind of like a realistic embodied figure as they've become. So it's almost as if they've become much more humanoid in their ways. And I don't know why, in the other period of drawing about 7 years ago, it was gods and goddesses who appeared then, and frequently as I'm drawing, names will come that I just think the name will just kind of start repeating over and over as I'm drawing it. So I just think, well, okay, that's what I'll name this one then, seeing as how that name was present. So early on, I had this drawing Orpheus that came maybe about 7 years ago. And that was kind of interesting to me because I don't really know very much about the whole kind of, Greek mythology or anything at all at that time. So when those kind of names appeared and started imprinting so deeply, then I started exploring more and researching more. And it's kind of continued in that way, really. Names will come up in the drawing and I don't really know anything about them. So I'll just it starts me on a whole period of research and exploration. And it
Mm.
just seems as though that's been the direction of it. And the Greek gods and goddesses, for some reason, really captivated me. And obviously, the more then I started to explore in that direction, then the more of those names came up as well. So I try not to question too much what or why or what's going on. I just kind of go with it.
Yeah, so when you're looking at a blank piece of paper, you don't. It's not like I'm going to draw a picture of Orpheus. It's just something begins to emerge, and then it kind of goes from there. Is that how it
Yeah,
works?
or I kind of think of it in, there are these other little kind of like, I think, I don't know if you know anything about process work at all, Arnold and Amy Mendel's work. So he talks about flirts. So these flirts start to appear in the environment, and that will often happen, way before I even get to having a piece of paper in front of me. Like for example, I've just been drawing this. I just did a little study this week of a skull and a hellebore flower, and that really came from a few weeks ago. I started seeing memento mori, the phrase memento mori. It just started cropping up everywhere. I'd kind of open a book and it would have memento mori in it, or I'd be out somewhere and there'd be a poster with memento mori. And so I start just taking notice of those little flirts in the environment. So it's almost like they start appearing everywhere and become more so. Or I'll start seeing like, a repeated image, like a skull will appear. Um, a friend was buttoning up their coat and they had little skulls all up the front, and I guess it's that kind of thing of, what we start to notice for, then we start to notice more of. So it's like I'm kind of tuning into it more, so I start seeing more of it as well. But that's really how the drawings start to appear, I think, is through just flirts in the environment. Might be
I,
the best way to describe it.
yeah, I love that idea of flirts, and it's my view that it kind of works both ways. It's things
Yeah,
coming from the outside in, and then you're kind of meeting that from the inside out.
yeah,
When I think about that kind of flirtation that the world is flirting you, I think about Gaston Bachelard and philosophers like that. And it's just the world is always flirting with us. It's whether we meet it, and then of course it begins to work both ways. It flows in and out. So I love all that. I think that's beautiful. I mean, there's actually one thread that I'd love to pull on that I've kind of been thinking about as you were speaking there, and I having kind of digged up a little bit on you. I know at one point you were a portrait photographer as well. And I listened to you say something around that you could see more in people than just kind of the person that was in front of you. Something, let me call it mythic. Um,
yeah.
and you kind of were exploring that even within your photography at that point. Is that fair to say?
Yes, yes, it is. And what's really interesting is that I kind of forgot about that. I sort of forgot about that until, and this is photography work I was doing, I don't know, 25 years ago. It's a long time ago. Um, and it's not until recently that I started looking back through my work and I'm like, oh, I was doing the same thing then that I hadn't even realized until now. And it's often like that, isn't it? It's not until we look back through our lives that we see this common thread that's stitched through everything. Um, so yes, yeah. At the same time as I was doing photography work, I was also doing the whole training in like NLP and mythogenic self work and things. So there was and kind of contemplating doing coaching work or some kind of counseling work with people as well. So I was working one to one, doing my body work and also doing this kind of spoken um, yeah, kind of like mythic storytelling work with people as well. And so that naturally translated really well to when I was working with people doing portrait photography, because I don't know, when you get people in front of the camera and they become very different, suddenly they kind of maybe hold back, or they're a bit self-conscious and things. And I realized that a lot of great portrait photography is about having really good sort of coaching or counseling skills to help the person relax, to help them sort of be more themselves in front of the camera.
Mm.
And so I guess I was using some of those skills in that way, but also you get glimpses of people, when they are unguarded, or when they who they are, or when they kind of feel more themselves. And there is almost this whole mythic self in front of them. And even if you just get a glimpse of it for a moment, there's a sense that there is something bigger or something more that wants to express through them. And their whole body position would literally shift into, a different perspective, or a different gesture, or a different pose. These different, just little glimpses, again, flirts of something bigger would come through the person. And I found that really fascinating. And say,
Mm.
well, what happens if, if we go with these, and where do they go? So, and also sometimes just, you know, seeing a person to do a portrait with, and just being playful and saying, okay, we've done our normal portrait session now that you needed for your business or whatever. But, how do you feel? As I was taking a picture, I kind of got a glimpse of this. How do you feel about just playing with this to see where it goes? And then I'd maybe get some furs or some bones or something, something kind of more ancient would come, and they would just play with it. And it would be amazing to see how their whole demeanor would just shift just with a few different movements or gestures. So, I mean, for me, this kind of work, the visual work, the mythic work, the body work, it's all one thing, right? It's all so interrelated and all entwined. So all of it, with the drawings, the body work, the movement work, I guess we're all trying to get to the same mytho-poetic image of who we are. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that, and yeah, for you and for all of us, it's just expressing in different ways. But it seems like you've embraced, this movement and kind of been very fluid with it. But there's been this sort of thread which has run all the way through. I'm really interested, Red, in um, back in those days when you were doing the portrait photography. Did was everybody happy to kind of play in that way, or were there sometimes when you felt, I can see it, but I'm actually not going to put it out there
Yeah.
with this person because then maybe they're a bit more timid or something? Or did everybody embrace it, or pretty much everybody embrace it?
Sure, there'd be people who would be, terrified. You could see, I'm not going to
Mm,
do that because it's intimate, to reveal who you are, or even a glimpse of who you are. It's a real intimate thing to do with another person. And of course, people would not necessarily want to do that, or would feel guarded or intimidated. Um, but I found also that really endearing as well, to be at such a, even to be in that tender and vulnerable place where you're saying, I'm not going to show this to you, felt also intimate. So that's almost like a little portal right there.
yeah,
Just to acknowledge that intimacy, and also to know when to stop. This is, again, I come back to my bodywork skills, to know when you've pushed enough, and to know when to stop, and to let the person adjust and, assimilate and incorporate what's just happened. And, always working with, it's like we were saying earlier, it's like a dance, isn't it? You're never pushing or forcing or taking somebody where they don't want to go, or um, it's always about that relating between the two of you, and just finding that sweet spot in between. Um,
yes, yeah,
and it's, again, it's the same process with the drawing, exactly the same process with the drawing. It's never about me trying to force um, my idea of what it's going to be. And that goes across drawing, whether it's body work, whether it's, doing a photograph with somebody. It's never about me imposing my will. It's just about meeting somebody where they feel comfortable, or meeting the drawing where it feels comfortable, or meeting the bodywork client where they feel comfortable, and then just exploring what happens or what unfolds when we meet in that place together. So that's where it's like contact improvisation, right? It's like you're both meeting in this absolutely equal place, and just following whatever unfolds. Mm.
And absolutely. And you're working with sitters even now for the drawing and the illustrating you're doing now, right? So there's still that idea of having the muse there, I guess,
Yeah.
in terms of a human being in front of you.
Well, yes and no, because I am working with people, but it's interesting. I'm now working with people remotely, and a new development in my work lately is I work with this amazing photographer in New York whose work I've admired for a long time. And he's been kind enough in the past to let me work with some of his existing images as kind of elements of my work, as reference elements for some of my work. And then we started working together consciously, kind of actually saying, okay, well, let's actually do some shots together. And so now I have this amazing new thing that's going on where I'll have a model muse that I found who maybe even is somewhere else entirely. And then there's a photographer, and then there's me as well. So there's three of us all doing this thing together. And that's just blowing my mind because then it's totally not about me. I'm like the last person in the process in many ways. It's like it's what's going on with the photographer and the model. It's what they're bringing to it, and it's what happens in their interaction, which makes a photograph. And then I take that photograph, and then that becomes something else as well. So it's got all these different chance or risk or openings in it, which are totally beyond my control. Um, and I love that. It's like, right now this week he's doing two shoots for me, and I've kind of given my input and I've said, a little bit of direction about what I'm looking for and what I'm interested in, and then I just let go and see what happens. Um, and it feels, again, I'm always reminded of body work and movement things. It feels again like going into a group contact improvisation kind of movement where we just surrender to the group and something much, much bigger comes through when we're working in movement practices with lots of people, right? So yeah, it's that's exciting for me, this whole new expansion.
Yeah, that does sound amazing. I'm wondering for people listening if there's a piece or two that you could reference that actually was a result of that interaction that maybe they could look at and maybe see through a different kind of lens.
Exactly. So the Circe drawing that I just did at the end of last year was exactly that. That was the first time we worked together in that way. So Daniel Murta, I should say his name because he's wonderful. Please link to him as well. He's an amazing photographer. Anyone in New York who needs photography done. um, so yeah, my model went to him in New York and they did the shoot together and they created these amazing photographs. And there was actually, and again, I had this idea about how I thought it might be. It was Circe, the kind of the enchantress, and I had this imagining that maybe she was pouring. So I had this, a vision, and I was trying to describe it. She was maybe pouring her potions into the waters. If anyone's read the Odyssey, they might know her part of the story. Um, but then when they did the shoot, there were actually two images that really spoke to me, and they had nothing to do with pouring water out of things. And it was particularly one of her face, which really grabbed me. I was like, okay, that's her face. That's the one there. But then in another one, she was just randomly doing something strange with her hands. And when I saw that strange hand movement, I was like, she's doing something with her hand. I don't know what she's doing, but she's doing something with her hands. And so I took these two images and then brought them back and was working with them. And the reason that I'm using the reference images, I should also add in as well these days, because I'm really striving for more and more like ultra realism. I want them to kind of really come to life. So the reference images for me are invaluable because they have all the tiny details of, the little scar or a little mole or a little something, all those tiny details that I'm really interested in. But yes, so these hands were doing something. I didn't know what it was, but I started working with the drawing and I put those hands in. And then I realized, oh, she's distilling herbs. She's like the kind of herb witch who kind of makes poisons from herbs. She's distilling herbs into this vial, which is below. But I didn't see that until I was actually doing the drawing and working with this hand position that had really grabbed me. But I wouldn't have known that. I didn't know that before the shoot. I didn't know it before until I saw the actual image. And even then, I didn't know what it was about until I started drawing with it, and then suddenly the whole image became very clear in front of me. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that makes so much sense to me. It's and interestingly enough, Circe is a wonderful goddess to bring up because just in our community at the Fifth Direction, we've just spent a whole month tracking our way through the Odyssey.
oh
So
wow,
she'll be very present for quite a number of us listening to this. We had I don't know if you know Jay Leeming, the wonderful storyteller Jay Leeming. He came into our space you know multiple times over February and told the story, carried the story for us, and it was quite beautiful. And Cersei always just sticks out in that story for me as just that's where I go, thinking about her. Um, so wow, that's
yeah,
amazing knowing that. And the other piece that I'd love to connect there is just um, hands, right? It's always about the hands. You talked about making them more ultra real. It's the hands. It's always the hands. I remember when just after my mother died, I was going through some of her belongings, and I came across a letter which she'd actually written to herself, but it was 8 pages and it was titled My Mother's Hands. And she'd just written about her own mother's hands and, how they'd cooked and held and bathed and loved and done all these things, but in great detail. It appeared as if she'd been looking at a photograph or even maybe remembering. But it was an exquisite piece of writing. And I think because it was about hands, it just sat me down, and the tears just came so easily. And I think it's hands.
yeah. What a
So,
beautiful gift. You have it still,
oh,
obviously.
of course. Yeah, absolutely. And it's just made me think about, even in my own work, I do lots of grief work and things like that. And it's when you bring people back to the hands, even just as an exercise of staring at your own hands, it's very real.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I just released also a guided meditation for people to do with honoring their own hands. So
Ah,
yeah,
beautiful.
I'm tuned into that whole thing too.
Mm.
And
Did
again,
that
partly,
come as a result, Red, of working with Cersei's hands like that? Is that where the meditation came from, or was it?
no, maybe it did actually, because I just did it quite recently. So maybe it has come from that. Yeah, but similarly, I've always had this appreciation and gratitude to have really strong, healthy hands because it's such an essential part of my work as well. Although in body work, I also use my elbows and my belly and my knees and everything else as well. But you're right. I think also being a body worker, maybe you recognize this. I care for my hands a lot anyway. So in between bodywork sessions, I'll be constantly massaging and kind of loosening tensions and making sure my hands are nice and um, clear, so they can feel and receive more easily. And
Mm,
that same work carries on through my artworks because when I'm sitting drawing for like 9 hours of the day with my hand in one position, obviously I need to then make sure it doesn't lodge or stick into that position too. Um, so I do constantly care for hands, but also I don't know why I love drawing hands. So people often say, "Oh, I can't draw hands; it's the worst." But to me, they're the most interesting. Hands are just so expressive and so I don't know. For me, I suppose they're very sensually receptive and sensitive. So I find them incredibly fascinating. And yeah,
mm,
this beautiful
mm.
gift of yours of your mother's hands and her writing. That's
No,
really
that it's very precious to me, and coupled with that, I always remember um, James Hillman, who's obviously a big player in kind of the mytho poetic space that I heard him talking about hands, and he was talking about how the bones in hands are so related, so similar to wings. The
yeah,
bone
yeah.
structure is, when you actually look at them, they are particularly close to wings. And I just find that it's just such a beautiful thing to think about.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So I love
Like
that.
little,
Yes,
mm,
that's right. That's right. And I'm thinking about you massaging your hands, and it almost seems to me like part of the ritual and ceremony that you place around your work, whether it's body work or whether it's the drawing. And I wanted to ask you, is that something that's very much embedded in what you do? when you sit down and look at the page, are there rituals and ceremonies that happen before, after, throughout? Give us a sense of what that looks like.
Yeah, so for preparing for a drawing, yes, I mean, there's a whole ritual, I suppose, that begins even like the night before. So, so each week I have a kind of structured week because my youngest daughter goes off to her dad's on a Saturday tea time. And so Sunday is always my first biggest working day each week. Um, and just to kind of to transition from that space of being like a mother to artist, I need to sort of do something to move myself into a different whole bodily space. I'll generally go for a good long walk out on the salt marsh. So for me, that's part of the ritual that starts even the night before. It's just that kind of moving my body into a different space, and connecting again with, earth and elements and tidal rhythms and all that kind of thing. Um, and then a good night's sleep always helps. And then the next morning, I might even walk again if I feel like I need it. Um, and then always come down to my altar and make, kind of copious offerings and prayers and just kind of really set the intention for what's coming. But it's all about just shifting myself. I think, especially as a mother, um, I'm so wholly embodied in that position, in that role, that I have to really bring myself out into this creative space. Um, so it takes a lot of that kind of work. But then also after doing the whole like work on my altar, I'm glancing down to it. It's just right here. um, After doing all my whole work on my altar and getting that ready, then there are other like small rituals I've come to realize. Like I'll always wash my desk down, so my desk is clean. Then I'll sharpen all my pencils really carefully. All those kind of small rituals that sort of lead into the process. Um, get my sort of drink ready, all the kind of little things that happen that seem, inconsequential, but I've come to realize they're just as much and just as important. Oh, another one is always making sure that the bird feeder outside my window is full of seed. I don't know, maybe I'm just superstitious. I don't know, but when I can see the bird feeder, it's literally outside my window where I'm looking now, and the birds coming in and out constantly, that feels part of the process now, I realize as well. Um, so yeah, there are lots of little tiny rituals, and I don't know, maybe I've become a bit OCD about it or something, but if I'm not careful, doing all that kind of little ritual can suddenly take me to lunchtime and I haven't actually started work. So I have to stop and just get on with the work as well.
I do like what you say though, Red, around um, the seemingly ordinary things, the seemingly mundane things. As soon as we put intention into that, they become sacred. And I think it's wonderful. You're not telling me about all these sort of very, these big gestures. It's just the simple stuff, but it's the intention that you're bringing into it, which makes them sacred and makes all the difference to me.
Yeah, definitely. And it is, I think I've come to realize it's the smallest things actually. So, I could even not do so much work at my altar, kind of making, long arcane prayers and all those kind of things. It's, if I do all that, but then haven't filled up the bird feeder, it's like, well, what's the point? I'm not actually doing any tangible offering or giving to the real creatures of the real world in this moment. So that feels like super important. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. And does that continue into the completed piece? Like if it's hanging on your wall, is there still nourishment given and prayers made even then?
Yeah, yes, definitely. And then so some of the completed pieces I have like right here, like at my altar, so they're constantly being fed with offerings, and I constantly bring them, especially the two particular ones that I work with the most. I'll constantly be bringing them fresh flowers or food offerings or myself, whatever. Um, but also with the prints that I do. So I sell prints of my work now as well, and I'll often bring in like big batches of the prints and bring them into the offerings as well, because I've become much more aware, as I was saying, that people are responding to the works and having these um, positive interactions with them in their homes. So I want to make that more so. Obviously it's good to. I'm sending things into people's homes, so I want that to be a good thing, right? I want it to be useful and helpful for them and not just a pretty picture on the wall. Um, so I've started to really, invest those prints with more. of that kind of intentionality about what they're going to be doing in people's houses.
Mm. And I'm sure you've had some incredible stories about what's happened in people's homes, or when they've hung one of your pictures, or framed and hung one of your pictures, and I'm sure you get feedback from a lot of people.
Yeah, I do. And like I said, I was really surprised by it at first. I had no idea that that would be a thing. And more and more people started message me saying that, this amazing thing had happened, or ever since this image came into their room, the whole energy of their house has transformed and this has happened. And um, yeah, I was kind of a bit skeptical at first, like really. But it's happened so many times now that it has become this real thing. So I'm going with it. Sounds
Yeah,
good to me.
absolutely. No, absolutely. And I was caught by the fact that you said that there's kind of two particular ones that you kind of work with, primarily, I guess. Were there moments with those two, or did something come through that kind of meant that these were the two that had to be kind of um, my main
Yeah.
dialogue, or primary dialogue?
Yeah, so I guess so one of them is the goddess Hecate, and that was because she was really my sort of way back into the this last lengthy period of drawing. When that thing happened with the pandemic, it was all around the time that I had just picked up my pencil again after maybe 3 years of not doing any drawing at all. Um, and I'd been doing this course on making an oracle, and this is just prior to the pandemic. And the teacher had invited us to pick up a pencil and just draw an image of Hecate, who was going to sort of bless and empower the oracle that we were working with. And I was like, okay, I'll see what I can do. I haven't drawn anything for so long. I'll just see what happens. And I started to draw, and I mean, looking back, it's quite a simple drawing now, but at the time, it was quite revolutionary for me because I was like, oh, I draw. I forgot about this, But it was this drawing of the goddess Hecate, and it just immediately flowed out, really crisp and clear. And it really struck me as, oh, it just reminded me, oh, I forgot I do drawing as well. um, and that was about 6 months prior to the pandemic. And again, it was about Hecate. I didn't really know much about Hecate at the time. We were just working with this oracle, and I knew some basic things about her. So I started exploring more. And then around about just before the pandemic began, another teacher, Jack Grail, who I've been working with a lot, was doing his own course on Hecate, a kind of deep dive into learning all about Hecate from the ancient times. So I did that, and I think I just started that when the whole pandemic and lockdown happened. So, talk about having a sense of these ones arising to kind of bring us through these moments. And Hecate is the goddess of transitional spaces, of liminal spaces, of moving from one place to the next. So, looking back, it was almost as if she had arisen just to carry me through this big transition that was about to happen. Um, and through doing the course with Jack as well, I started drawing. I had been drawing ever since I'd kind of had this realization 6 months earlier. I'd been doing little drawings and little practicing things. But then suddenly, when the pandemic happened, and I was doing this in-depth course on Hecate and learning more about who she was, and working with these ancient prayers, the ancient texts of the Greek Magical Papyri, and working with those, and then suddenly this much bigger drawing of Hecate came through. Um, and so she's kind of become my patron goddess in many ways, just because she really rose up at that time, and I feel has really carried me through the last 4 years, and has been behind everything that I've done. I feel so she's definitely got pride of place up on my altar, and I've carried on doing. I've done lots of other works to her, and I imagine there'll be more to come as well.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and then the other one is Hermes, who came through a sort of came subsequent to Hecate, but in a similar kind of way. I felt because I really needed my work to be successful financially, because I have my kids to care for, and all of life to pay for. Hermes is the trickster god um, of success in business and success in commerce and success in those things. So I naturally pay a lot of respect to him and make lots of prayers to him because I need to make this work. So so far it's been okay. So
Yeah,
I keep
wow.
on
Well,
making offerings.
yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. I mean, that's just that's wonderful to hear. I feel a particular connection to Hermes as well. Ah, yeah, many
Yeah, and
words, many
they're
words.
both they're both related as well. You know, they are both psychopomps. They're both kind of these gods and goddesses of the kind of taking you from one place to another or taking things
Exactly.
from.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that's right. That's right. And you know, I'm really glad that you raised Jack Grail's name too, because if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I am, but I think there's a beautiful verse that seems to accompany your Dionysus piece.
yes,
And I think if I'm not wrong, it's that they're Jack Grail's words. Is that
yeah,
right? But it's so powerful. It's I remember just making my way through your website and seeing that there and just being completely captivated by the words. And so I'm glad that you kind of brought that into the conversation as well.
yes. That's from his book, The Hecateion. And he's a master poet of writing beautiful invocations to the gods, which he kindly let me work with for a few of my drawings. So I worked with his invocations specifically when I was bringing some of those drawings forth. So Dionysus was one of them.
Mm,
Um, yeah, that's been really powerful actually to work with his things. And again, I went on to do his subsequent course on learning about the Greek Magical Papyri and working with a lot of those ancient conjurations and spells, which has been really powerful for my drawings. I think to actually, this is what I was talking about, working more intentionally with bringing those forces forward. So, you know, working with like 2,000-year-old sorcerers' notes to bring forth the gods, you know, in those days for healing or for better fortune or for whatever things. But in my present day, I'm working with them to bring forth them into drawings and to help people with whatever their needs are. So it seems to be incredibly powerful stuff when I'm just reading at the beginning of it in many ways. So
mm, mm.
seeing where
And
it
I love
goes.
the way you just feel yourself as just a conduit of the energy. It's just flowing through you and out the pen, it feels, and or out the fingers, whether it's body work or something else. And that's, you know, that's humbling. And thank you. Yeah, yeah.
I think, you know, a lot of the times if we can just get ourselves out of the way of these things, then
100%, 100%. I think it was like we were talking in the beginning and not having expectations about the end product and
yeah,
just being open to the expression.
yeah, and listening. I find myself listening more than doing. I think that's a really important part of it. And coming back to the hands again, um, I think I find myself listening, but I listen through my hands, through like the center of my hands. And you know, when I'm working with a client, with a bodywork client, I quite often have my eyes closed, and it's just that but I have a sense of listening, but my ears are in my hands, and it's the same with the drawing as well. It's and especially nearing the end of a drawing, I spend just as much time just sitting with it and not actually drawing, and just yeah, listening into what's wanting to come or what's needing to be, you know, the tiniest little details that are just put here and there. And it's just about, as I was saying, getting myself out of the way and hearing what is already present. Yeah.
Mm. Well, I love that. Read that idea of kind of whole body listening, but particularly the hands. I think that really speaks to me. Yeah.
Mm.
I'm going to change gears a second and bring us kind of into current times because I think one of the ways that we began interacting, just sharing a few messages here and there on Instagram was around the time that you started getting censored. And to me, I was just yeah, my jaw just dropped. I couldn't quite believe what was going on for you. And so maybe you could just talk us through a little bit of those times and when that started happening and how you were feeling and kind of how you've dealt with it, I guess, because strange times we live in, Red. Strange times.
Yeah, it's curious, isn't it? Because, you know, I was watching what was it, that sci-fi series Three Body Problem I watched this week, which is like so violent. I don't know. I used to watch horror films when I was younger, but I don't know, maybe since I had kids or something, I can't handle it at all. And I found that series incredibly violent, and it's only rated 15 because I was considering watching it with my oldest daughter who is 15. But I thought, I actually can't watch this. This is so violent. It's like it really affects me in a kind of quite intense way. And I was amazed really that something like that can get just a 15 rating. And I thought, why hasn't it got an 18 rating? But it's because it doesn't have any nudity in it. And I was thinking, how amazing is it that, ultra violence can have just a 15 rating, but as soon as you add like a naked breast or something, that's it. So, that's it. We can't see this. It's terrible. Um, and I guess the same kind of mentality pervades on social media in many ways. It's, to just see a naked human body is, I don't know, it's not, it's just an ordinary thing for me. I guess because I work with so many naked human bodies, they're just very ordinary and beautiful and magnificent, and whatever their shape or form or whatever wounds or scars, it's all so incredibly miraculous to me to have, just bodies are so miraculous. So to have them censored just for being, nude seems ridiculous to me. But meanwhile, you can see all sorts of crazy, violent images wherever you like. That's okay.
Mm,
Um, I guess it's just a sign of the times we're in. But I find it quite sad, that the bodies aren't held in a higher esteem for everybody, or held in a higher regard for how beautiful they are. And I don't mean as in a kind of visual sense, but just for how beautiful they are at keeping us alive, or doing the healing that needs to be done just naturally within us, whenever it needs to happen. So yeah, I'm
mm,
just in awe of human bodies. Even when there are things to deal with, when there are troublesome things to deal with, how they'll always strive to heal themselves. They'll
mm,
always trying to find the way towards life. Our bodies always move towards life, no matter
mm.
what we do with them. And I find that so humbling and beautiful.
Oh, thank you for saying that. There's a couple of things in my personal journey which spring to mind, and whilst we have never met in person, if you did, you'd know that I'm 6'7", and pretty lanky, and I grew up as an adolescent with a lot of body shame, and but my body allows me because with my height and with my long limbs, it allows me to do so many incredible things. And yet, my culture kind of led me, to believe that it was a problem. And I think we're speaking into the same thing here. It just seems all very backwards to me as an older man now looking back. Um,
Yeah,
and the other piece that I wanted to add was around this idea of how miraculous it is, because um, even um, on my health journey at the moment, I see sometimes these big diagnoses like cancer and so forth. Like they're actually the first stage in healing. If you look at it through a certain lens, it's the body trying to heal itself of something deeper. And
yeah,
I've just, the more life takes me forward, the more praise I have for the human body.
yeah.
It's just a miracle.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just a function of getting older or what, but I think at some point on my own journey, anyway, I just became a lot less bothered about what I look like and much more appreciative of what my body can do.
Mm,
Um, Perhaps it was when I gave birth. I think giving birth twice, and just being witness to this incredible miracle exploding through my body twice. That just blew my mind. And I remember after giving birth, each time just looking at myself in the mirror and going, women are amazing, and not only women, but like our whole bodies, everybody's bodies are so miraculous, these incredible things that produce life. And yeah, it's just, I think that has just made me really realize that it's what we can do with our bodies in whatever state, whether we're compromised in any way, still all the things we can do with them, and to focus on what works. I think that's become kind of quite a guiding principle anyway. It's like regardless of where we're held back or where we're limited, what can we do? What can work? What does work? And how can we do more of that?
mm. Yeah, and all that said, I can only imagine the emotions running through you to see your work censored in that way. You talked of feelings of sadness, but I wonder if it kind of spilt over into other things like frustration and that sort of feeling as well.
I mean, I've definitely, I go through periods on social media of being frustrated with it and then like posting about it, like, I'm so annoyed my piece has been censored. And then I realized, finally, now I've realized it's just boring to keep posting about how it's censored. It's like, we all know this happens. We all know that artists struggle with this on social media. So, and there's nothing much I can do about it. So now I just, you know, then I went through phases of thinking, well, I won't post anything. I'll only post censored images. And then I'm like, oh, fuck that. Let's just post whatever the thing is. If it gets taken down, it gets taken down. I guess the only risk is that does worry me is that I've had repeated warnings that I might lose my account. But then recently I've also realized I can't rely on social media as being my only channel for sharing these things. So it's actually been really helpful because it's made me have a lot more investment of time and energy in building things off social media. Um, so that feels really great. I've just launched my whole new website and I've got a sort of subscription service on there and things. So I can have a place where I can post what I like, and the people who come there understand what I'm posting. They're not going to get worried by it or frightened by seeing a naked body. So it's actually been quite liberating.
Mm.
Yeah, it's always good to be liberated from social media, right?
100%. I mean, I can feel different things in my body even talking about it in this conversation. But it needs to be spoken about in this particular case. And as you were speaking there, I kind of felt Hermes entering the room. The merchant god, but there's sort of a trickster way of going about it, isn't there? Like I could hear his voice because yes, it is important. Yes, it is important. It's a wonderful avenue for your work. But at the same time, as you say, fuck it, I'm just going to put it out there. And if people see it, they see it. And if they don't, they don't. If it gets taken down, like that's where you have to land, I think. I don't think there's any other place to be.
Exactly. And also I have to think about what is the intention of what I'm posting? What's my account about? Is my account about just posting these images unapologetically?
Mm,
Um, my account about kind of, complaining about things or whining about things or putting out that kind of like, oh, poor me kind of energy. And it's not that at all. So I have to just stop doing that and just keep doing it, keep doing what I want to be doing anyway.
mm,
And not be no, not actually censor myself through this.
mm.
So yeah.
Well, I can tell you, Red, as somebody on the other side of the world, you know, coming across those images and they just stopped me in my tracks. Like I literally felt like I had to go and take a walk around the block. You know what I mean? And so, um, please keep doing what you're doing. I think it's absolutely wonderful. Um,
Yeah. Is there one particular one that you saw that spoke to you most?
um, Look, I think I have to say the first one that really grabbed me was the Dionysus one.
Mhm.
Um, it was just a big, bold, intricate image, and it just you sort of you're in that moment where you're kind of just scrolling through things, and then it's just like bam, and it just completely took me out of my ordinary thinking, and into something just vastly expanded. And I just found myself kind of like almost like my eyes were um, being drawn into particular details here and there, and it was like a whole world for me.
It's
Mm.
good to know that because there's so many. We're so bombarded with so many images these days. It's like we're such a visual culture, and especially on social media. So I do sometimes wonder putting these things out there. It's just another image that people are going to see. So it's good to know that you've felt something, which is my whole intention with the drawings. Is can I convey the feeling that I have, or something of the feeling or my experience through the drawings? So as an artist, it's really gratifying for me to hear that something of that felt sense comes through. So
Oh,
so thank you.
no doubt, no doubt. For me, it was a back straightening moment. Um, and I immediately kind of wanted to find out more, so I kind of looked you up and then realized that there was so many other dimensions to you. And I thought, wow, this I sort of understood, as I said in the beginning, looping back to as to why there seemed to be so much power in that work, because it was coming from just so much more than um, um, an artist, if you know what I mean, from the point of somebody who just draws. There's just all, as you say, you've kind of been evolving into this life all the way along. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's obvious from the outside looking in. So thank you.
Yeah, it's like, I think I was just musing on this yesterday. I was like, why do we take, for me, like maybe even more than half my life to get to this point where I'm doing the thing, finally doing the thing that I love to be doing, that I've always loved to be doing. Why is it taking me this long to get here? Why wasn't I just doing this all along? What if I just been doing this since I was drawing when I was 6 years old? What if I just followed that path that I wanted to do? But then also I look back and look at all of the things that I've done and all of the different, incarnations almost that I've had to get to this point. And I realize, well, that was all learning to become this person that is making this art now. So it's all valuable. And it was all always leading to this place. And all of those parts of me inform everything I'm doing now. So it's
Oh,
like, I have been
100%.
doing, even if it hasn't been expressed as pencil drawings on paper, I've always been, collecting information, collecting skills, gathering myself together, and working on myself and working with myself and going through all these experiences to become the person who can then now at this age put a pencil to a paper and make the drawings. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I think I agree, and I can feel that in my own life, and I'm sure other people listening can too. I mean, I feel it's really only been the last few years when I've been really doing what I was put here to do, but maybe in 10 years from now, I'll say the same thing. It's like I feel like we're always becoming ourselves, but because we're having experiences, we're always a step ahead. So we've always got to keep catching up, and that's why the work is never ending. It keeps going until our last breath, and beyond. So that's my sense. But right now, for me too, I feel like why did I spend 20 years in the corporate world and all these different things? But I had to, had to get married and unmarried and get unwell and then get well again and do all these different things, and it all informs the person I am now, and it couldn't be any other way.
exactly, because they're like transferable skills from all of these experiences, right?
Absolutely, 100%. You're right. I went through a period in my life when I was kind of very down on myself for the time that I spent in the corporate world. But now I understand. I'm so grateful because of the skills that I gained.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can't, like, if I was just an artist just doing my work, I wouldn't necessarily have the skills to be able to maybe, promote it as well or kind of build websites around it. But the fact that I actually worked in one of my previous lives running my own graphic design company and building websites, oh, now actually that's like a really useful thing to bring on board. I can write HTML code and JavaScript if I need to. It's like, random things that just pop up that you think, oh, that's why I did that for that time. So
yeah. Wow.
yeah.
I more more skills to add to the resume, Red. Yeah, it just never ends. I guess as we come towards the end of this conversation, I did want to ask you about the bit that kind of sticks out when I look at all the things you have done, and that is this creation of the kind of woodland community, and that work. And I'm sure there's many out there who would think, well, what does that look like? What does that mean? And I would love you to speak into that because I'm sure it's all connected back to this conversation and in essence the drawing and the bodywork and everything else, but could you kind of weave that thread into the whole picture for us?
Sure. So what are we talking about now? This is like, yeah, when I moved here to Norfolk, so sort of maybe just after 16 years or so ago, when I was married and living with my husband, and I had young children, young babies, um, and we were living in an off-grid shed in the woods, where I lived for 9 years actually, no electricity, growing our own veg, doing all that whole thing. um, and we were homeschooling our kids as well. That was our planned intention. And the intention was to just do everything out in the land, in the woods where we were. Um, but I'd never had children before. I didn't know how to raise babies. I didn't know anything about that kind of stuff. But we had this beautiful land and this amazing space that my ex-husband had put in a lot of time and energy and love into making this place. Um, so I decided to make this kind of gathering happen so that I'd have community around when I was raising the girls there. We weren't just like on our own in the woods. and I could share this beautiful place and this gorgeous setting with people who would come there too. Um, so I just set this thing up, and it was kind of like, what again, coming back to the question, what do I want? What would I like an ideal morning gathering with a whole lot of other families to look like? And I've been doing a lot of reading about the kind of Steiner Waldorf schooling methods, and thinking, if there was a school like that around, that would be really cool. The girls could go there. But there wasn't. The nearest one was like an hour's drive away in the city, which seemed a bit crazy. So I started learning about all that kind of those teaching methods, and I brought a lot of that sort of structure and rhythm into what we were doing. So it was a very ritualized morning together, where it was this very sort of strict rhythm that was followed through the whole morning, which was helpful for me because it gave me a framework of how I'm going to do this. I'd never led community groups with families and children anymore, any time. So yeah, so it became really successful, to cut a long story short. And so for 3 mornings a week for 6 years, this group ran, and served over 100 families who came to it regularly. And it was a big group. There's like maybe 15 kids plus adults, every three mornings a week for 6 years. And so just through doing it, I think it became this real nourishing thing that helped and supported me. It was quite selfish, really. I was doing it just to help and support myself and my own journey as a mother, but also became this nourishing thing for all the other families too, where we do handcrafts and sing songs around the fire, and we'd share food together. And it was mostly about doing stuff with the parents, I think, as well. I think that's one of the reasons it was so successful. It wasn't a kids group. It wasn't like a forest school. It was about creating a space where the parents could come. And partly because I was an older mother when I was starting, and I was quite used to having my own space, my own time, my own creative practice and process. And I wanted a space where I could still do that, but with other adults too. So we did craft projects with the adults, not with the kids. So I could still be doing, like, I was learning skills as well myself, like basket weaving, and I knew knitting. I was teaching knitting, that kind of thing. And the kids were really happy because they were just running around in the woods on their own. I mean, with the parents around, but they were just left to their own devices, which is, I think, ultimately what a lot of kids want anyway. They just want to play freely, with adults around, but with not having them hovering and supervising. So anyway, it was just a great thing to be doing, and I learned a lot about holding group spaces through just actually doing it, but also being in that space for that regular rhythm and that regular ritual 3 times a week for 6 years meant that we gave a whole lot of really positive experience, I think, into that place. And I began to notice that the place itself almost seemed to be giving back to us in times. So in all that time, in that whole 6 years, we very rarely had a session where it really rained heavily, for example. And everything was outdoors, so it would have been a bit unpleasant if it had really, really poured down and put the fire out and all that kind of thing. But even if it was a rainy day, it would generally kind of ease off through our session, and it was like a 3-hour session each morning. So it would usually ease off and give us, nice or reasonable weather to have the session with. And then I'd notice at the end of the session, there would always be like a sort of story circle kind of singing around the fire, and I'd sing the same seasonal songs over and over, that would change according to the seasons. And it became this real like magical invocation time sometimes, where I'd be singing the song, and I'd be singing about a bird perhaps, and a bird would actually come into the circle, or singing about a wind that would come, and the wind would come and blow the trees at exactly the right time. So I had a sense sometimes of leading the circle, but kind of conjuring or conducting the elements as well at the same time. It was really magical experience for me that I often felt that whole awe and wonder, and mystery as well. I kind of question, like, what's going on here myself? What is this? It's so amazing. So yeah, this is a long way of just saying to you that that time I feel invested in one earth spot, I found incredibly valuable. And I think that's something I've carried with me. Even as I left that place and moved close to the marsh, I've carried on investing time and energy into places and spaces because I've realized that what's going on during that time is that I'm actually building this real deep relationship with a place. And I didn't know that was possible until I was actually doing it, that you can actually have like a real incredible deep connection with a space and a place that feels, when I left that place, that felt in some ways, in many ways, harder for me to leave the place than it did my marriage. Because it was like, there wasn't any sort of discomfort or disquiet with the place. So, and I had to, it felt hard. It felt like a real painful severance of me not to have that relationship with that place anymore. And I had to do a
Mm.
lot of ritual work around it and to go back to the place and to sort of talk to it and to find meaning and to find new ways to take what I learned about that relationship into new places.
Mm.
Um, so yeah,
Well, I
that's a lot
mean,
of.
yeah, I mean, a lot comes up for me. I mean, it is a marriage of sorts, isn't it? It is a
Yeah, I
marriage
think
of sorts.
it's
Mm.
always there. I think even though I've left there and I don't go back there in that same way, it's still there. When I go back to that place, I can still. It's almost like getting back into a nice warm bed again. When I go
Mm.
back to that place, whole bodily felt sense of mm,
Well,
all
yeah, I mean,
around.
and listening to you speak, Red, it's clear that it's informed a lot of who you are. And I loved what you said there around how the everything comes to meet you. You're seeing the songs about birds and the birds appear. And I have this idea that, when as a community, when you're doing things right, that nature gets curious about you,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
starts to come in a little closer, and
yeah,
starts to dance with you and work with you. And I think that's what you're talking about. And it just feels good. So
yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
And what is beautiful, the other thing that I've taken from that is I'm still in touch with a lot of the families who came there, and
Mm,
they still talk about those days, and they still talk, and they still sing some of the songs, and that just touches me to know that that experience was not just about me and my experience there, but that all these other families who came and shared that also felt something of that magic, and have also taken something of that magic into their lives as well. So that feels the most rewarding part, I think, as well. It wasn't just about me having my kind of, wondrous experience in the woods.
yeah.
It was about sharing it. It was about kind of bringing the families in that maybe wouldn't have come and spent 3 hours in the woods, each week at all, bringing them
Mm,
into that wonder and then having something open for them that they might not have experienced that then becomes part of who they are and
mm.
who they are moving forward in the world as well. So
Yeah, it's like it's villaging as a verb, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's I realized that the whole 3 hour session was just a big ritual
yeah.
because we're doing the same actions. Obviously they're slightly different, but the same walk, then the same food, then the same craft, then the same activities, but in different forms, in the same structure every week, repeatedly, repeatedly. That holds all of us. It holds everybody. Parents would come with kids who'd been up all night and they were all discombobulated. They had an argument with their husband or whatever, and they just fall into this deep holding ritual space where they just know this is what's going on. This is the rhythm and the routine is going to hold me through this, and then they'd go out of it with everything left behind in the woods, and they can carry on with the rest of their day. So again, that whole experience gave me a real sense of how ritual is this
Mm.
powerful, transformative process in whatever shape or form it appears in.
Well, Red, if all of that energy and all of that beauty it can get distilled into a piece of art that anybody can hang on their wall, wouldn't that be wonderful? To come back to that. So, for anybody listening here, I really invite you in to have a look at what Red's doing in the world. And yeah, if you can make the investment, I think it'd be, for me, a very worthwhile thing to do. So I don't know, Red, as we kind of close out, can we? I'll share all the bits and pieces in the notes in terms of how to find you and all the things that you're offering, not just the artwork, but is there anything you want to kind of say at this stage to help people kind of find you in the world? Where's the best place?
Well, I've made it all really simple now with my nice new website. So if you just go to www.redkelders.com, then everything I'm doing is all in that one place. So you can just have a little explore and see which part of, which aspect of anything I'm doing calls to you.
Mm. Yeah, and for those listening from our community, the Fifth Direction, we'll share some images so you can kind of get a bit of an idea. And look, from me to you, Red, thank you so much for joining me and taking a morning out to have this conversation. It's been a real joy for me, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. It's been a privilege.